Have you ever wondered what the meaning of life really is? It sounds like one of those deep questions everyone asks at least once. But the more you think about it, the harder it gets to answer. What are we even doing here? Why do we keep moving forward? Why does anything matter? Philosophers have tried to answer that for centuries. And one of the most famous among them, Jean-Paul Sartre, had a very specific idea. He believed that existence precedes essence. That means we're born first, and only then do we figure out who we are. No destiny, no grand plan, no pre-written purpose. We simply exist, and whatever meaning our lives have comes from what we do with that existence. But there's something fascinating about that thought, because it's not just a human question. Sometimes fiction gives us characters who face the same dilemma in ways that feel surprisingly real. And one of the clearest examples is Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, most people think of Shadow as the cool Sonic. He's dark, mysterious, fast, powerful. He can even stop time, and yes, he carries a gun. He's the definition of edgy. But if you look beyond the aesthetics, Shadow's story is one of the deepest existential journeys in all of gaming. Because behind the chaos, the explosions, and the attitude, there's a being that doesn't understand why he exists. Let's go back to where it all started. In Sonic Adventure 2, we learn that Shadow was created by Professor Gerald Robotnik. Gerald's goal wasn't to build a weapon. He wanted to create the ultimate life form. Something that could cure diseases and maybe even make humans immortal. In other words, Shadow was never meant to destroy. He was meant to save. But on the space colony ARK, things took a dark turn. Shadow wasn't just an experiment anymore, he became a person. He met Gerald's granddaughter, Maria, who treated him not as a project, but as a friend. Someone who deserved to be loved. Maria believed that Shadow could bring hope to humanity. She saw in him what her grandfather didn't, not a weapon, but a heart. Then came tragedy. When the government found out about the experiments, they sent GUN soldiers to shut everything down. The colony descended into chaos, and as Shadow tried to escape, Maria was fatally shot. With her last breath, she told him to protect humanity. That single moment shattered him. He lost not only his friend, but the only person who ever made him feel real. After that, Shadow was captured and sealed away for 50 years. Half a century of silence. Half a century with nothing but fragmented memories and an echo of Maria's voice. When he finally awakens, freed by Dr. Eggman, he's no longer the same being. His mind is fractured. All he remembers is Maria's final plea, but twisted by pain and confusion. He thinks she wanted revenge, so he decides to destroy humanity, to wipe out the world that took her away. It's tragic, really, because in trying to honor her memory, he ends up betraying it. He teams up with Eggman, planning to use the Eclipse Cannon, a weapon capable of erasing entire cities. He believes that's what Maria wanted, that somehow, by ending everything, he'll finally make things right. But as the story unfolds, pieces of the past start returning. He begins to remember her voice, her words, her hope. And when the space colony ARK starts falling toward Earth, Shadow finally understands. Maria didn't want vengeance. She wanted him to protect humanity, to give people another chance. So, in a final act of clarity, he sacrifices himself, using chaos control to save the planet, fulfilling Maria's real wish at last. From that moment on, Shadow changes completely. He stops being a weapon, or even a hero. He becomes something else, a wanderer, searching for what it actually means to live. And that's where Sartre's philosophy hits hardest. Because Shadow isn't like us. He wasn't born, he was created for a purpose. Which means, technically, his essence precedes his existence. He was given meaning before he could choose one. And that's exactly why he suffers. He's trapped between two worlds, between destiny and freedom, between design and chaos. He's the perfect being, who doesn't know what being perfect even means. When he loses his memories, he becomes exactly what his name suggests. A shadow of himself. An echo wandering through life, trying to understand what life even is. That's why Shadow's story is more than just about power or revenge. It's about identity. It's about existence. It's about what we do when the universe refuses to give us an answer. Because, like Sartre said, there's no answer waiting out there. Meaning isn't handed to you. You build it. Through motion. Through struggle. Through chaos. And speaking of chaos, there's a concept in physics that fits perfectly with this idea: sense. Every vector has a direction and a sense. Direction is the line something follows. Up, down, left, right. Sense is the way it moves along that line. Forward or backward, east or west. A vector that doesn't move still exists, but it has no sense. It has potential, but no meaning. That's exactly what happens to Shadow. He exists, full of potential, full of power, but without motion, without purpose. He's static. He has direction, but no sense. It's only when he starts moving again, when he fights, runs, chooses, that he begins to create his own meaning. Each action, each decision, becomes a small vector in his life, a line pointing somewhere new. And that's the essence of existence. Movement gives direction, direction gives sense, and sense gives meaning. When Shadow uses chaos control, it's more than a power, it's a metaphor. He's trying to bring order to the chaos within himself, to stop time, to freeze uncertainty, to make the world and his mind stand still. But life doesn't work like that. Order never lasts. The universe is in constant motion, constant entropy, constant change. And maybe that's okay. Maybe meaning isn't something permanent. Maybe it's something you find for a moment, then lose, then find again. That's what Shadow learns, and that's what makes him human. Not his strength, not his speed, but his confusion, his search, his willingness to keep running even when nothing makes sense. So when we look at Shadow, the so-called ultimate life form, we're really seeing a reflection of ourselves. We too exist first and only later try to define who we are. We too lose our memories, our goals, our direction, and have to rebuild them piece by piece. Shadow isn't just running through a level, he's running through existence itself. And maybe that's the answer Sartre was trying to find all along. That meaning isn't out there waiting for us. It's created in motion, in the act of moving forward no matter how uncertain the path. Because when we move, we define a direction. When we choose, we give that direction sense. And when we keep going, despite the chaos, that's when life starts to mean something. So maybe that's the real lesson Shadow teaches us. Life isn't about controlling the chaos. It's about learning to move through it. To fall, to rise, to run, to stop, to keep going again. Meaning isn't in perfection, it's in persistence. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find our own sense. Not in some perfect order or divine plan, but in the act of moving forward. And maybe that's enough, because the movement itself is the meaning.